Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tanvi, and we at Kotak Securities welcome you to today's session on sector selection for potentially good returns. This will be followed by an extensive question and answer round by the end of the session. So, now, without any further delay, let me introduce you to our speaker of the evening, Mr. Piyush Chitlangia, founder of FinShiksha. Piyush has been in the financial services industry for the last 13 years and has an extensive exposure to equity research and financial modeling, along with conducting trainings and workshops in the capital markets domain. He is also a CFA charter holder and alumnus of IIM Calcutta and MNIT Jaipur. Prior to FinShiksha, he worked as an equity analyst and fund manager at Allegro Capital Advisors. He has trained nearly 15,000 participants across organizations. Piyush has done multiple classroom and webinar sessions with highest rated feedback for employees and franchisees of Kotak Securities in the last couple of years. His core areas of interest are equity valuation, derivatives, and financial statement analysis. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Piyush Chitlangia. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Tanvi. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Very good evening and warm welcome to the session. Hope all of us are doing well and safe and sound. Uh, I'll take this opportunity to thank the Kotak team for inviting me for this session. We will begin with the session now, and today's session is basically about looking at sector selection for potentially good returns from an investment portfolio. Right. So, how does industry analysis and sectors analysis or sector selection pave a way for great returns when you are, or potentially great returns when you're investing in the stocks, essentially, right? So with that, we'll begin with the session, and towards the end, we'll anyway have a longer Q&A session as we go along. So let your questions come in, and we'll take them as we go along. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. For the duration of the presentation, I'll just keep the cam off. I'll switch it on again towards the later part. Let me just quickly share my screen. Can we see the screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So without much ado, let's begin with our idea of the sector selection for potentially good returns topic. The core message here is that sector selection in itself plays a very, very important role in creating a good, solid investment portfolio, right? If we get the sector correct, then more or less like 70-80% of our work is done, even if we potentially don't get the best company in the sector for our investing. But if I can broadly get the sectoral understanding correct and time that, basically that'll be the best possible sort of platform for me to generate potentially good returns, right? So we'll look at a few examples. We'll see how do we go about doing sector analysis. We'll look at some frameworks around sectors as to how could we use them to kind of analyze whether sectors are good, not so good, how does that work. uh, that's broadly about us. The purpose is that we learn some basic industry analysis frameworks with the perspective of investing, along with an understanding of risks that come with different industries, right? However, there's a disclaimer that none of the examples discussed in the presentation are to be used as an advice or a recommendation to invest. This is just for the purpose of education and understanding that when we are doing a sector selection, how does the sort of understanding work, and we'll use examples of various companies, various sectors to get that understanding, right? Let's jump right into it. When we are doing industry analysis or sector analysis, any sector, koi bhi sector hum agar pick karke, if we're trying to do industry analysis around that, there are some key parameters that we have to look around that. Take any sector, for example. The first and foremost idea that we have to have is what is the size of the sector. Akhir sector bada kitna hai, right? If we can get a sense of the size of the sector, we can understand where are the firms today and what can the size be in due course of time, right? For example, if we look at, let's say, the size of the four-wheeler industry in India, we can get a sense of, okay, how big the four-wheeler industry could be in due course of time, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, how many people will eventually have four wheelers? How many have them today? And what is the sort of quantum jump that can happen from today to that point? How's the situation in two-wheeler segment? How's the situation in telecom segment? Right? So what is the size and overall expanse of the sector is something that becomes really, really critical. That size defines what kind of growth opportunity exists in the sector, right? So if the size itself is huge, then every firm will have a reasonable growth opportunity in the sector. If the size itself is not huge, then firms will struggle to kind of compete with each other in order to get the same pie in the market, right? Take telecom, for example. Practically tele density or number of people in India who have connections is like, at a reasonably high number. So at least in urban areas, for example, tele density is actually more than 100%. People have on average more than one connection, right? Now, in this kind of an environment, the size has already been achieved. The growth opportunity comes at the expense of another player. So you have to take somebody else's customer and get them in. Unlike some of the other sectors where the growth opportunity comes because we have not even penetrated the market today, right? So in that context, it's important to understand how big is the industry, right? And what kind of growth opportunity exists in the industry, right? Then you want to look at the value chain. The value chain of any sector involves that there is a company. The company will have its suppliers and the company will have its customers, right? Especially on the customer side, you want to understand whether the company is a business to business company, B2B, or a business to consumer company. The parameters change dramatically when you look at some of these companies and you analyze that. And we'll look at some examples to kind of understand that how does a business to business company differ from a business to consumer company, and what kind of scale growth assessment that can come in terms of our understanding of the sector. That becomes important from the value chain perspective, right? You also want to check what is the customer segmentation. When I say about customer segmentation, think of इंडिया एज एन इकोनॉमिक पिरामिड, राइट? अगर हम इंडिया का पूरा जो ब्रॉड इकोनॉमिक स्पेक्ट्रम है उसको डिवाइड कर देते हैं, इफ वी डिवाइड इंडिया इनटू लेट्स से पार्ट्स, विल प्रोबब्ली क्रिएट लाइक 4 segments here. That will be the higher income group, upper middle income, lower middle income, and the sort of economically not so well off strata. So there will be these 4 segments that are there. When you are analyzing companies, it is important to understand which segment are they catering to, because that segmentation defines what kind of pricing power you have, what kind of growth opportunity do you have, what kind of size of customer base you have. Are you playing the volume game or are you playing the margin game? आप high price product sell कर रहे हैं at a high margin but lower volume, or are you playing the volume game? I'll give you an example, right? Consider 2 companies in the two-wheeler space. There is Hero Motocorp and there is Eicher Motors. Eicher Motors makes your Royal Enfield brand of bikes, premium bikes, right? Now, if you just visualize this on the screen, you will note that most likely your Eicher Motors will be catering to customers somewhere here, right? In the segment 1 and some part of segment 2, right? Because the bike is priced at 2 lakh rupees. So obviously not everybody can buy it. Hero MotoCorp, on the other hand, would primarily be targeting somewhere here, most of segment 3 and a little bit of segment 2 as well, correct? Now that itself defines some things clearly. Who in these two will have more pricing power, right? Clearly, the one who's at the higher end of the segment in terms of the economic segmentation will have a higher pricing power. So Eicher will have pricing power, which means they can increase the price of their bike and it may not have too much of an impact on the sales. Hero may not have such luxury, right? Because the moment Hero tries to increase the price of one of its bike models, like let's say the Splendor, there is competition in that market, right? Also, अगर आप सोचें कि इन दोनों companies में which company is basically selling it from the perspective of a discretionary decision, which is my choice to buy a vehicle, versus which company is selling it more as a conveyance solution. So Hero Motocorp आपको conveyance का solution दे रहा है. If I have to use a bike to travel from my home to office, that's a conveyance solution I need. Royal Enfield is more sort of people who can afford it are planning to buy it because they feel they associate with the brand. So Royal Enfield or Eicher Motors has an element of discretionary purchase embedded into it. What do you mean by that? It's a choice. I may choose to buy it, I may not choose to buy it. Right now, let's relate this entire thing to the pandemic scenario. So last year we had this entire pandemic opens up. Now the markets open up again. People start going to their offices. They want to look at, and public transport is either not available in complete totality or it's not reliable. People don't trust public transport at this point of time. They want to use their own vehicle. If you are using a conveyance solution, you are likely to buy, the first purchase is going to happen with Hero Motocorp. If I'm using a Royal Enfield bike for some fun activity or because I want to buy it, I generally like having a extra vehicle at my home, that discretionary purchase will not necessarily happen immediately. That may take some time to come back, right? So understand that where the company is in this segmentation defines what kind of strategy the company is using, what kind of pricing power the company has. Does it have pricing power or not? Can it basically pass on if there is an input cost rise? Can it pass on to people? So this segmentation is very, very important. You can again kind of take examples and think about it. Sometimes companies are across the segment. So for example, a company like Airtel or Jio will be across the segments. They'll provide services to everybody across the spectrum, right? They may charge different offering. They may create different offerings and charge different things from customers in one versus customers in four. That's a different issue altogether. But generally, you would have sort of some companies that cater to the entire spectrum of things. Some companies otherwise find a clear niche and they define, okay, this is where I'm going to operate on. And that defines what kind of pricing power those companies have in general, right? Keep that in mind. Then you want to look at what are the key drivers of the industry. When I talk about key drivers, think about the entire chain from the supplier to the company to the customer. What is it that is driving the purchase? क्यों product sell हो रहा है? क्यों product purchase हो रहा है customer के end पे, right? And once we define that value chain, it gives us a very good understanding of, okay, who has the upper hand in this industry, right? Again, think of examples. I mean, let's take a company in the steel sector, right? So steel company would have suppliers who could be giving them iron ore, who could be giving them coal, right? Then there's a steel company that manufactures steel. It's typically a B2B business. So the customers would be, large infrastructure players or, whatever. But generally a B2B purchase is what is going to come. What is going to drive steel companies' profitabilities, right? Steel sector's profitability. Demand has to go up, right? The other thing that can happen is supply goes down, like what happened around us in the last quarter. There was a squeeze on the supply side on the steel sector. So steel prices went up. In addition, given that I know that my key drivers include iron ore and coal, anybody who has access to captive mines, my own mines, basically mines have been allotted to me, then I don't need to buy iron ore from the market. I can mine iron ore out of my own mines, right? So that's a key value driver in this context. If you have access to captive mines, if you have a global demand uptake, and you know where is steel getting used, if those end industries are doing well, then essentially your key drivers are in place. So B2B, these kind of drivers happen. B2C, you could argue that, drivers are, economic growth, people are sort of earning more money, there is more disposable income, and so consequently, the growth in a certain sector is happening because of that. We need to understand what is the regulatory environment. So is the government creating some sort of a regulation? Like banking sector, there's a regulatory requirement. Telecom, there is a regulatory requirement, right? Airlines, there's a regulatory requirement. So what is this regulatory requirement? Is the government generally in favor of allowing companies to operate well? Is the government trying to curb the pricing in the sector, for example? So that environment understanding is very, very important with respect to what's happening in that segment and how does that basically play out. And then finally you look at competition. I'll come to competition in more detail, and we'll look at competition from the perspective of variety of things. How does the competition operate? What kind of behavior they have in the markets? How do they play around? But before we go there, we will talk about a very common framework of industry analysis. I'm sure some of us might have read about it, heard about it in the past. This is a very useful framework to help us gauge the attractiveness of a particular sector at any given point of time. This sector, this is called as Porter's five forces model. Right now, what does Porter's five forces model tell us? There are five forces that basically apply on any industry. Five forces that apply on any industry. If these forces are high, right, this is negative for the industry. If these forces are low, this is positive for the industry, right? So let's first understand which are these five forces that exist. The central one is intensity of competitive rivalry, how much competition exists in the sector. Then you have threat of new entrants. How easily can new entrants come into the sector? New companies can come and start a business if the sector is profitable. Threat of substitutes. बिजनेस का कोई सब्सटीट्यूट अवेलेबल है इस सेक्टर का, सो आई इंस्टेड ऑफ यूजिंग दैट सेक्टर्स प्रोडक्ट कैन आई यूज समथिंग एल्स. What is the bargaining power of my suppliers and what is the bargaining power of my buyers, right? So ये पांच forces जो हैं किसी भी sector पे work करते हैं. When they work on any particular sector, if these forces are high, for example, if there is a very high intensity of competitive rivalry, it will be negative for the sector and its companies. राइट, अगर कॉम्पिटिटिव राइवलरी ज्यादा है तो प्राइस वॉर होगा. प्राइस वॉर होगा तो कंपनीज कभी प्राइसिंग पावर ले नहीं पाएंगे. दे विल कीप कंपीटिंग विद ईच अदर इन टर्म्स ऑफ व्हाट काइंड ऑफ प्राइसिंग will come into the picture, right? So that's something that is relevant and important that we need to understand from the perspective of this bit, right? अगर लो है, if there is a low intensity of competitive rivalry or threat of new entrants low hai, for example, that makes the sector more attractive for any specific company in the sector, right? So I'll again write it down. If the forces are high, it is negative. If the forces are low, it is positive. Let's take examples. Let's start with each of them one by one. Intensity of competitive rivalry. Think of sectors where this is very high, right? Think of telecom, think of airlines, right? Think of e-commerce. These are sectors where typically you will see a price war happening. आप टिपिकली देखेंगे कंपनीज जो हैं वो एक दूसरे से प्राइस पे फाइट करते हैं बिकॉज ऑफरिंग में और कुछ डिफरेंशिएटर है ही नहीं, right? It is very difficult to compete against each other on other offering products. So typically companies end up fighting on prices. If there is a massive intensity of competitive rivalry and companies are fighting on prices, typically all companies in the sector suffer. Their profitability goes down. So any sector where competitive rivalry is very high, right, that's negative for the sector. You will typically see, how do you know whether there is competitive rivalry? You will see price wars. Companies will fight with each other on prices, right? Interestingly, for example, अगर आप नोट करेंगे तो FMCG सेक्टर में हिस्टोरिकली प्राइस वॉर होता था जब HUL और PNG एक दूसरे से they used to fight with each other on the prices of their products. That over a period of time settled. Same with Pepsi and Coca-Cola, right? They used to fight on prices and then they realized there's no point fighting on prices, so fix the price. And the intensity of competitive rivalry went down in that context, right? So understand this, that whenever you are picking a sector, how are companies behaving with each other in that sector? Are they fighting with each other on the price? If yes, it's generally a negative for the sector as a whole, right? The market will not value this sector as much as some other sector where there is a lot of pricing power, right? Threat of new entrants. How easily can somebody new enter the market, right? We take an example of some business like e-commerce. E-commerce has no entry barriers. So you want to see if a sector has any kind of entry barriers, right? Entry barriers का क्या मतलब है? People cannot just walk in and start the business tomorrow, right? To disrupt what is going on today. If a sector has no entry barriers, anybody and everybody will walk in as long as profitability is high. जब तक sector का profitability high रहेगा, कोई ना कोई उस sector में enter करता रहेगा and consequently profitability कम होता चला जाएगा, right? So whenever an e-commerce company starts making money, somebody else will walk into the space, right? There is going to be that point. However, companies can create entry barriers through some mechanisms, right? What are these mechanisms? Mechanism one of entry barrier is regulation, government control, right? So even if I want to start an airline tomorrow, I cannot. Even if I want to start a bank tomorrow, I cannot. I will need regulatory approvals. When I need regulatory approvals, it automatically puts entry barriers in the industry, right? Then, typically it's not so easy for anyone and everyone to walk in and start this industry if we look at it, right? The second is capital requirement, right? So if capital requirement in a sector is very large, जैसे स्टील सेक्टर अगर हम देखेंगे, if you look at something like a steel sector, right, you require nearly 6,000 crore to put up 1 million ton of steel plant. Right now, someone like a Tata Steel has 20 million ton capacity in India, right? So how do you compete with them? To build that kind of a steel plant, you will need 6,000 into 20 million ton crores. 6,000 into 20 crores, 1,20,000 crore to put up that kind of a capacity, right? So capital requirement is large and gestation period is large. Even if I have the capital, it's going to take me some time to put up the plant, right? So if I have to compete with the competitor today, I want to do it today, right? So steel hua, cement hua, oil and gas hua, all these high capital intensity sectors, right, where a lot of capital is required, there are general entry barriers created. Not everyone randomly can walk into the sector and say, okay, let me also put up this store, or let me also get into this sector. So automatically the number of players gets restricted in the sector, right? The third and probably the most important one, specific to B2C companies a lot of the times, is either a brand or a distribution network, right? Now look at examples of this. uh, Take HUL, Hindustan Unilever, right? One of the reason the market likes that sector is because HUL has created substantial entry barriers given its brands, right? So for example, take the soaps segment, right? We all would realize that soap making is not very difficult. Sabun banana is not very difficult. It's a simple task. If we do a little bit of Google search, we'll find it how to make it, right? The problem is in selling it. Distribution is the problem, right? Which is why some of the top brands in the country of soaps belong to HUL, right? Lifebuoy, Lux, Dove, Pierce, all of these are HUL brands. The reason they have created this sort of a brand control or brand loyalty is that it is very difficult for somebody else to just walk in and try and sell against this, right? Think of Pepsi and Coke. The brands they've created are so strong. It is not difficult to make a soft drink or a juice brand, but it is very difficult to distribute it pan India. You will find in every state there are localized players who sort of sell soft drinks, but very difficult to compete with these companies on a pan India distribution setup, right? So it is important to look at some of the sectors where entry barriers have been already put in place, either because of regulation, or because there is a lot of capital requirement, or because the companies have sort of created brands in the sector, right? Once you have done that, automatically the sector tends to have lesser competition, and that benefits the sector over a period of time. Correct? So that's the second one. If you have a high threat of new entrants, like argument's sake, the e-commerce sector, or any sector where practically a new person can start working tomorrow, is going to be a problem, right? B2C segments में ऐसे बहुत सारे होते हैं जहाँ पे कि very low entry barriers exist, so new players can walk in without too much of a challenge. I mean, for example, your um, ride hailing, Ola, Uber variety segment is somewhere where you may not need massive amounts of capital. Tomorrow, what happens if a Reliance walks into that, or a Tata Group walks into that, right? In fact, that's precisely why in a lot of the e-commerce setups, these groups are checking in, because once they are in, they have the capital to take care of any of the existing players, which is causing sort of a disruption in that sector, right? Let's talk about threat of substitutes. Substitutes jo hote hain, they will typically, in today's day and age, you have to look at technology. Is technology doing anything that can tend to substitute the offering that the industry has at this point of time, right? And a classic example that just played out in front of us in the last 2 years was the airline segment, right? What we are doing here using something like an online tool earlier used to happen in person. People used to travel, so airlines used to have nearly half of their business from, sort of business travel, and all of that has just gone off. I mean, vacation travel will probably come back, but business travel probably fundamentally alter ho gaya hai, right? Because we have started using all these tools like Zoom, we have started using tools like Google Meet, we've started using tools like other webinar tools, which have allowed people to kind of communicate with each other using this technology, and that has basically disrupted an existing model. This is an example of threat of substitutes, right? Your mobile phone has substituted a lot of industries straight away, right? And that's why that's a classic case of a threat of substitute in a particular industry. There are certain industries where it is difficult to find a substitute, right? Technologically that substitute does not exist. I mean, cement, for example, you will need cement ka koi substitute nahi hai as of now, right? Tomorrow there may be a new product that gets developed, but at least you can't use an app to build a house. That doesn't work, right? So the substitution happens where there is typically a sort of service being provided or a product that has a better technology solution that is available. But for all practical purposes, the threat of substitutes is high for industries that border on the use of technology. And if you can use technology, then you can substitute the existing setup that exists, right? That's where threat of substitutes come in. Think of any industry and try and understand कि क्यों एफएमसीजी कंपनीज को वैल्यूएशन ज्यादा मिलता है. वो इसलिए मिलता है क्योंकि उसको सब्सटीट्यूट करना बहुत डिफिकल्ट है, right? I mean, the product that is there, which is, let's say, soap or food, at least at this point of time, nothing exists that substitutes that, right? But there are some other industries which are providing services where you could have a substitution impact coming in. Substitution could come, for example, hotels versus something like Airbnb, right? Technology use karte hue Airbnb kind of defined some new sort of service which kind of tends to be a substitute to the hotel industry. So is there anybody who's using technology to try and create a substitute of the product that is being sold today? That's a key aspect of things, right? That's something we have to understand. In fact, there's one more slide on this. I will just want to show this to you. When at the beginning of 2020, right, uh, Zoom was valued significantly lower. But as 2020 progressed, at some point of time towards the end of 2020, Zoom's valuation was $150 billion. Right now, it's around $120 billion, if I'm not wrong. Right? This is, I think, end of October 2020. So since then, obviously, markets have done well. So things have changed a little bit. But the value of Zoom was equivalent to the 15 biggest airlines of the world. And this all happened in 2020. That's a classic example of threat of substitutes. Airline industry faced that. And a lot of it may not necessarily, be travel that is going to come back at some point of time. So understand that in an industry, that could be a big substitute that could happen. Let's quickly look at bargaining power of suppliers. Now think of this. There's a company and there is a supplier industry. Whichever is the stronger industry or more consolidated industry, or there is a stronger player in that industry, that defines this bargaining power. I'll give you two examples. Think of a supplier like Intel. Intel owns practically a monopoly in terms of the chips of computers. So they hold the cards for any kind of negotiation and pricing with any kind of computer manufacturing company, right? On the other hand, think of a company like Maruti, which owns 50% of India's passenger vehicle market, right? If the company is strong, then the supplier cannot have a say. The supplier's bargaining power is low, right? If you are looking at the passenger vehicle industry in India, there are basically the top 2-3 players account for about 70-80% of the market share. So the bargaining power of the supplier will be low. A supplier providing a tire, or a supplier providing a seat, or a supplier providing a steering is easy to replace for a company. by another supplier. So auto ancillary companies, which are the suppliers to auto companies, typically do not have a lot of bargaining power, right? So understand from an industries, and that's where that value chain becomes important, right? If my supplier is an iron ore manufacturer and I do not have iron ore, then the bargaining power of the supplier is very large. They can charge whatever they want for iron ore, right? If I have the iron ore, then automatically that changes the equation. So how strong is the supplier defines bargaining power of the suppliers. Similarly, how strong is the buyer defines bargaining power of the buyer. Usually B2B segments mein your customers are strong. In B2C segments, your customers are not very strong. They're sort of weak. Why? Because these are retail customers, right? Now assume everything opens up and PVR Cinemas opens up. If I go to PVR Cinemas, can I tell PVR Cinemas that, please cut the price of the movie for me, right? Or let me watch the movie first and then I will pay you the money. They wouldn't allow that, right? I have zero bargaining power in that. I have to pay before I avail the service, right? If you want to understand bargaining power of the buyer, understand a couple of points. Question one, how big is the switching cost? Can you switch very easily between one company and another company in the sector? Second, can you go to the company and ask, please cut the price for me? Right? That also gives you a sense of whether you have a bargaining power or it is intensity of competitive rivalry that is giving you the discount. For example, if I go to an airline company on the counter of an airline company on an airport and tell them, please cut the price for me, they will not cut, right? I have zero bargaining power there. They'll say, this is the seat, this is the price, please take or leave. They cut the price because of the intensity of competitive rivalry. तो ये जरूरी है कि हम establish करें कि कौन सा factor dominant है उस sector के लिए, right? So that's a classic framework. Let's look at the framework again. Let's try with a couple of sectors. Let's try cement sector, right? So intensity of competitive rivalry ideally should be high because cement is a non-differentiated product, but cement companies typically operate like a cartel usually, right? So pricing उन्होंने fix कर दिया है, utilization उन्होंने fix कर दिया है, capacity utilization. तो usually the competitive rivalry goes down because the top players do not want to cut prices. So this is low. Interesting sector, right? So that is low. Threat of new entrants, you need capital, right? Capital required for the sector is high. So threat of new entrants automatically becomes low. अगर आपको सीमेंट प्लांट लगाने में बहुत सारा कैपिटल लगने वाला है और उस प्लांट को लगाने में 3 साल लग जाने वाले हैं, you are better off coming and buying an existing company rather than putting the entire capacity yourself. So threat of new entrants also becomes low. There is practically no substitute of cement, so this goes low. Who are the suppliers of cement? So cement को चाहिए होता है limestone, right? You need gypsum. If you think about cement manufacturing, you need a little bit of coal, power, etc. Right? अब सीमेंट इज अ बल्क कमोडिटी. अगर आपने सीमेंट कभी खरीदा हो तो आप देखेंगे कि सीमेंट सेल्स फॉर लाइक 5-6 रुपीज अ केजी. देयर इज अ बैग ऑफ सीमेंट, 50 केजी का बैग होता है, 50 केजी बैग, that sells for about 300-350 rupees, right? So 6 to 7 rupees a kg is the retail price of cement that typically comes. So what that happens is makes cement a unique industry. You can't transport cement too much. So if I'm producing cement in West India, I can't send it to East of India, right? Because the transportation cost will kill the cement price in the markets. So it is a localized segment which kind of ensures कि जो मेरे mines हैं उन्हीं के पास में सीमेंट प्लांट होगा. The cement plant is typically created next to the mines. Either you get access to the mines or your vendor has an understanding. But even if I am a limestone supplier, I can only sell to the cement plant that is next to my mines that are there. Because if I try to transport it elsewhere, the cost will just become prohibitive. Right? So technically, bargaining power of suppliers, although I think the cement company also depends on these mines, so I would write that as medium. And today, bulk of cement goes into sort of housing. Housing is a B2C segment largely, and so the bargaining power of buyers is also low. अब हमने क्या कहा था, जिस सेक्टर पे सारे फैक्टर्स लो या मीडियम होंगे वो सेक्टर अच्छा है. तो ऑलमोस्ट एवरीथिंग इज लो फॉर सीमेंट, right? Some are medium, some are high. If you take another sector, for example, look at look at telecom, for example, you will see high intensity of, let me use another color for telecom, let's say high intensity of competitive rivalry, or take e-commerce for that matter, right? High intensity of competitive rivalry, high threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes exists. Bargaining power of buyers, if it is a B2C entity, is low, but switching cost is very low as well, right? And suppliers, depending on what you are selling in e-commerce, the bargaining power of suppliers is high. Although I think as you become larger and larger, the bargaining power of suppliers also becomes low there. So there are some benefits, but it's not as clear as something like a cement sector. Now, make no mistake, this is not a recommendation for cement, because अभी तक हमने valuation के बारे में कुछ भी बात नहीं किया है cement का. It is quite possible कि sector के जो भी positives हैं वो already priced in हो stock market में, right? So that is something we have to keep in mind, but it is important to understand that इस sector में अगर आपको dips मिलते हैं, तो it allows you an opportunity to sort of enter into the sector purely because the sort of conditions of that sector are generally well. Now you have to keep monitoring it. Tomorrow, if cement companies start doing a price war, right? Tomorrow, one large cement company announces, I am going to cut prices of cement. There will be a lot of trouble in the cement industry because historically ऐसा assumption नहीं है कि price में war होने वाला है, right? अब वो assumption आ जाएगा अगर ऐसा कभी हुआ तो. So that you have to keep in mind that these are dynamic forces. They can change from time to time. They depend on the behavior of the people in the industry, right? Let's take a few quick examples in certain sectors, how companies and sectors have competitive advantage created. जब भी आप कभी किसी कंपनी के बारे में या किसी सेक्टर के बारे में एनालिसिस कर रहे हैं, तो it's always good to understand how does the competitive advantage work, right? So it could be because of brand. Classic examples are Coke, Royal Enfield, Apple. It could be because you have an advantage because government का regulation है, NTPC, Indian Railways, Telecom, Airlines, जहाँ पे government का license required है, other people cannot operate. You have sort of monopoly or duopoly, right? It could be because you have a strong distribution network like HUL, Pepsi, ITC, etc. It could be because of operational efficiency, right? Domino's Pizza. Domino's doesn't sell the best pizza in the world. They don't even claim that their pizza is the best pizza in the world. अगर आप याद करेंगे तो उनका इनिशियल पिच वाज 30 मिनट्स और फ्री. सो दे वर बेटिंग ऑन ऑपरेशनल एफिशिएंसी. उन्होंने वहां पे अपने कंपटीशन को किल कर दिया, राइट? इज देयर अ जेस्टेशन पीरियड, व्हिच मींस आपको फैक्ट्री लगाने के लिए टाइम लगने वाला है. सीमेंट में 3 साल लगते हैं, स्टील में 4 से 5 साल लगते हैं, राइट? Is there a low supplier bargaining power? If you are a large player or a consolidated sector, right, which means only 2 or 3 very large players, then the bargaining power of suppliers is low, right? No ready substitute available, right? Cement, Royal Enfield, premium bikes basically, right? So you're not buying because you want a conveyance vehicle, right? Cost competitiveness. Maruti is a classic example, right? Again, no comments on the valuation at this point of time. What I'm trying to suggest is that in a sector where so many competitors ended up coming in the last 20 years, the company has still been able to maintain not only margins but also market share. That's remarkable. You can't do that without solid cost competitiveness, right? Low customer bargaining power. If you are a monopoly, right, then you'll have low customer bargaining power. Then your supply side economies of scale. सप्लाई साइड इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल मेंशंस कि अगर आप बहुत सारा क्वांटिटी में कुछ प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं तो उसका कॉस्ट कम होता चला जाता है. तो मेटल प्रोडक्शन हुआ, एयरलाइंस ऑपरेशन हुआ, इंटेल का प्रोडक्शन हुआ, रिटेल चेन्स हुए. अगर आप पूरा जैसे जैसे आप एक्सपैंड करते चलते हैं वैसे वैसे आपका इकोनॉमी ऑफ स्केल अचीव होता जाता है, राइट? देयर इज ऑल्सो डिमांड साइड इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल. क्लासिक एग्जाम्पल्स आर योर फेसबुक, right? If I am on Facebook and my friends are on Facebook, then everybody else also will have to, who has to connect with us, will also have to be on Facebook. So as the demand increases, people sort of keep coming back to that network. If a lot of drivers are on Ola and a lot of users are using Ola, then the next drivers and next users have to basically come and use Ola, right? So that's something that a lot of these platforms in this day and age create. जितने ये platform businesses हैं सारे, वो यही क्रिएट कर रहे हैं कि बायर और सेलर जितने ज्यादा होते जाएंगे प्लेटफॉर्म पे उतना ज्यादा ऑल योर ई कॉमर्स बेसिकली वर्क्स ऑन दैट प्रीमाइस. सो दैट्स एन एग्जांपल ऑफ economies of scale. Once you have created an economy of scale, once you have created a large scale, you have a solid competitive advantage. राइट। अभी दो तीन और चीजें बचती है जो सेक्टर में हमें देखनी चाहिए। वन इज अपॉर्चुनिटी साइज इन द सेक्टर। आई गिव यू एन एग्जांपल एंड एक्सप्लेन इट वेरी क्विकली। जब भी आप किसी सेक्टर को देख रहे हैं तो यू हैव टू लुक एट व्हाट इज द साइज ऑफ द अपॉर्चुनिटी इन दैट सेक्टर, हाउ बिग इज द पोटेंशियल एंड वेयर इज इट टुडे, राइट। सो इट कुड बी यूजफुल टू सी पेनिट्रेशन लेवल्स इन इंडिया वर्सेस द वर्ल्ड, राइट। इट कुड बी यूजफुल टू सी पर कैपिटा यूसेज ऑफ समथिंग। जैसे इंडिया में स्टील का पर कैपिटा यूसेज इज अबाउट 60 kg per capita, whereas that in, let's say, China is about 500, approximately 500 kg per capita. Clearly shows a difference in terms of the infrastructure that is built and all of that. So we're going to go there, not necessarily in the next 5 7 years, maybe the next 20 years, 30 years, whatever. But per capita usage can give some guidance on where we are versus where the world is, right? And size of the industry relative to the global size. कई बार हमें लगता है कि कंपनी ने या सेक्टर ने बहुत परफॉर्म कर दिया है तो और कितना परफॉर्म करेगा, right? If stocks in the sectors have gone up, how much more can they go up is a common thought process we have. That we have to understand that, relative to the world, what kind of size are we talking about? What if India actually starts catering to, the sector in India starts catering to the global opportunity as well, right? So then you could get a good sense of, what is the size and opportunity scale that exists. Take a classic example, domestic case, old example, right? So this is from investor presentation of Eicher Motors, Royal Enfield. So these are the number of volumes, bikes sold of Royal Enfield each year. They used to follow a calendar year principle, and this is in thousands. So in 2010, they sold 53,000 bikes in the year 2010, right? अब आप किसी भी तरह से स्लाइस करेंगे, अगर आप इंडस्ट्री का ओवरऑल साइज चेक करेंगे इंडिया में टू व्हीलर्स इंडस्ट्री इज, even at that point of time would be selling about 1 crore bikes, 1 crore two wheelers, right? 50,000 is like 0.5% of that industry, right? So this is a very low segment. It can't, 53,000 bikes being sold in India just does not make sense, right? And more importantly, this is a company that had like 95% market share in their segment, which is greater than 350cc bikes, right? Obviously, as disposable income grew, their volumes grew, right? What was 50,000 in a year, in about 7 8 years, if you go to 2018, it became 70,000 in a month by 2018, right? They sold 8 lakh bikes in 2018 financial year, right? And that just goes to show that the scale itself sort of increased 16 times. Volume increased 16 times because there was an opportunity that was available and the company executed it, right? Of course, then when you are at 8 lakh bikes in the year and India was selling about 2 crore bikes, then this is now a 4% market share. A 4% market share is a reasonable understanding. I mean, if I go back to this slide, for example, uh, even if you're selling to this segment here, right, 0.5% market share is too low versus a 4% market share. 2010 में market share 0.5% था, 2018 में 4% हो गया. 4% looks reasonable, 0.5 does not. That is a classic example that just looking at the size of the industry, you could have seen potentially a good sector, a good opportunity that would have happened, that it was waiting to grow. There are ample examples like the consumer lending में आप अगर देखेंगे तो 10 साल में जो consumer lending का space है कितना grow किया है, that has probably provided a lot of opportunities. Banking sector has provided similar opportunities. You can look at the size and scale of some of the other segments as well and make similar assessments that what kind of growth can be achieved over a period of time, right? And that is a testament to how you can use industry size to your advantage. Final point when you're looking at an industry is to understand the concept of operating leverage. ठीक है, इसको simple terms में समझें तो any industry with high fixed costs tends to get volatile, right? I'll give you an example. Let's assume there's a company A and there's a company B. आप नोट करेंगे दोनों का sales, let's assume for a minute this is in INR crore, 1000 crore ka 1000 crore sales, then there is a, so cost is same for both of them, right? You'll see the cost is 800 total costs are 800 for both the companies, 600 plus 200, right? And 1000 minus 800 gives me an operating profit of 200, right? A fixed cost is fixed for a particular capacity, right? अगर मैं अपना कैपेसिटी यूज नहीं कर रहा हूं तो मेरा फिक्स्ड कॉस्ट फिक्स्ड है. जितना मेरा कैपेसिटी है उसको मैं एक्सपैंड नहीं कर रहा हूं तो मेरा फिक्स्ड कॉस्ट फिक्स्ड रहने वाला है. इट्स नॉट गोइंग टू चेंज. टेक द एग्जांपल ऑफ होटल्स, राइट? माय कॉस्ट इज फिक्स्ड. जितना मेरा स्टाफ है, जो मेरा ब्रॉड कॉस्ट है, वो सारा फिक्स्ड है. अब चाहे होटल में 10 लोग हों या 100 लोग हों, if I have 10 guests or 1000 guests or 100 guests, the cost doesn't change dramatically. There may be some variable cost of food and electricity and all of those things, but bulk of the costs are fixed. So a hotel would be more like a company B where fixed costs are high. Whereas FMCG, for example, and HUL is more like company A where fixed costs are low. Where if I produce the soap and sell the soap, that's when the cost comes. Otherwise, there's no cost, right? Now think of a scenario where in this kind of a scenario, let's assume sales change by 20% plus 20%. ठीक है, तो कंपनी बी का सेल्स हो जाएगा 1200, कंपनी ए का सेल्स भी हो जाएगा 1200. The fixed cost remains fixed. There is no change in the fixed cost. Variable cost typically changes with sales. So simplistically put, this also should go up 20%. So 600 becomes 720, 200 will go up 20%, that will become 240. Correct? Total cost क्या हुआ? 920. Total cost क्या हुआ? 840. अब profit देखिए. In the first case, the profit becomes 280. So with a 20% jump in sales, you see a 40% jump in profits. In the second case, profit becomes 360. With a 20% jump in sales, profit jumps 80%, right? And that's why businesses which have high fixed cost can give very massive turnarounds when cycles turn. जब आपका occupancy increase होने लगता है तो suddenly profitability increase होता है. अच्छा, make no mistake, this works the exact same way the opposite side as well. अगर मैं -20% कर दूंगा इस कंपनी में तो यहाँ 800 होगा, फिक्स्ड कॉस्ट फिक्स्ड रहेगा, वेरिएबल कॉस्ट विल गो डाउन बाय 20%, right, which will give me a total expense of 760, which gives my final profit as 40. So with a -20% movement in sales, my profit goes from 200 to 40, which is -80%. Same calculation, right? So companies with high fixed cost have volatile segments. Sectors with high fixed cost become very volatile. So you will see that typically sectors like hotels, sectors like telecom, sectors like airlines, sectors like even for that matter metals, some of these which have a lot of high fixed cost component that is involved in their business, they tend to have massive volatility in their profitability on cycle turns. When business cycles turn, there is a massive volatility that can come into that scenario. You have to be careful because if you're caught on the wrong side, the risk is very high. These are risky segments, both sides, right? You can make a massive return in some of these segments and you can lose a lot of money in some of these segments if you're caught on the wrong foot, purely because a lot of the cost is fixed. You can't change that, which is also why sectors that take a lot of debt, loan लिया होता है, you have to pay interest. Interest is a fixed cost, right? Whether you make money or you don't make money, you're still required to pay the interest, and that creates a scenario where you could have this setup where operating costs could remain, a lot of them could remain fixed when sales are going down as well. So इसलिए जब कंपनीज का डेट ज्यादा होता है और सेल्स गिरने लगता है तो दे स्टार्ट अंडर परफॉर्मिंग मैसिवली. सिमिलरली डेट आपके कॉस्ट को फिक्स्ड रखता है और सेल्स ज्यादा होने लगता है तो सडनली योर प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी आल्सो स्टार्ट स्पाइकिंग इन दैट सिनेरियो. सो दैट्स द कांसेप्ट ऑफ ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज. टू समराइज, it is important to pick a correct industry, because picking a correct industry results in bulk of your investment returns. If you can basically look at sort of a good sector and you catch it at the correct point of time, that's bulk of the work done. Investing becomes far more simpler if you have captured the correct kind of a sector, right? Always remember, an average company in a great sector almost always is a better thing than a great company in a very difficult sector. कंपनी कितनी भी अच्छी हो, अगर कंपटीशन उसको अलाउ ही नहीं करेगा बिजनेस रन करना, So it is going to be very difficult for anybody to make investment returns in that scenario. It could be a great company, but if there is no competitive advantage in the sector, it's not going to work. On the other hand, it could be a mediocre company, but if the sector has a lot of drivers that are involved, that becomes remarkably superior, right? So that's basically something that has to be kind of looked at in this context, right? Understanding the opportunity size is very very important. सेक्टर कितना बड़ा है, आज कितना है, और आज से 5 साल 10 साल बाद कितना बड़ा होगा, that is very very important. And understanding what could be potential risk elements in the sector are also very important. एग्जीक्यूशन रिस्क हो सकता है, डीलेज हो सकते हैं, मेटल प्राइसेस अगर आपका इनपुट है वो इंक्रीज कर सकता है, pricing could be a problem, government could come and control, lot of things can create risk elements in the sector. I mean, take for example the airlines industry, right? If you were to actually list down the risk factors, it is one of the sectors that faces risk on a day to day basis. I mean, there is high competition, there is no brand loyalty, right? So competition is super high, people are fighting on price, right? It's anyway, your fuel cost is your biggest cost, and that is like a fixed price. It's a big challenge for you. So high fixed cost becomes a challenge, right? Then weather is a big problem. साल में 2-3 महीने ऐसे होते हैं जब आप कुछ भी कर लीजिए, there will be substantial delays and you have to compensate people for that. Security is a big concern, right? You have to basically invest heavily in aircraft security as well. So if you think of risk elements, there's just so much risk involved in that sector that if you don't get the cycle correct, making money in these kind of sectors is very very difficult. So understand that from a pure perspective of industry analysis, it's a good idea to kind of see if you can put all these in perspective, and if you can, picking a good industry at a good time gives you a massive advantage in investment returns, right? That is broadly it from me in terms of our discussions. I will now open the floor for questions. I have received some of our questions, so give me a minute. I will just open those and start answering those as we go along. Right? Let me just look at this. Okay, so 1 second. Let's go back here. Let me switch this on. I have a question that says, are the 5 forces high or low in FMCG sector? Think about it. You will have competitive intensity of competitive rivalry between companies. In fact, let me go back to that slide. So we will have that as well for our understanding. If I go back to the slide of competitive rivalry, correct? Think about it now. So intensity of competitive rivalry is typically high, but most companies do not fight on prices, right? They're not fighting on prices. So to that extent, they would have now come to a point where, while there is a lot of competitive rivalry, it is typically in marketing. They don't compete with each other in terms of pricing yet. I'll probably say medium, right? Threat of new entrants is usually low. Why is it low? Because it requires a lot of time and effort to build a brand in FMCG, right? And classic example in front of us, ITC has been trying to make a dent in a lot of the segments. It's taken so much time, but it is still not a very big player in a lot of the segments it is present in, right? In some segments it has become big, but not in all. So it requires a lot of effort, and ITC actually has a lot of cash flow available for them to spend in the business. Think of a smaller player. How do you really go in this segment and try and build? So that's very difficult. Threat of substitutes is low, especially in like foods and soaps and all. Of course, I can substitute the food I am buying, or but as a category, it's very difficult to substitute something, right? So if I'm looking at, let's say, tea, I can't substitute tea or coffee that somebody is producing, essentially, right? Or I can't substitute, let's say, atta that somebody is producing, or I can't substitute, personal care as a segment altogether. I mean, within the segment there could be multiple offerings, but can't substitute that as such. If you are a large player, typically your supplier bargaining power is low, right? If you look at the FMCG segment and B2C segment, so bargaining power of buyers is also low. If you're getting an offer, that's because of the competitive rivalry. So in general, most of these forces would be low for the FMCG sector as well. right? Okay, I have a question that says, post corona, which would be the sector for what would be the three of the most affected sectors? I mean, there could be many, but typically anything that helps in digitization is going to be big. So the entire digital move is going to be a major segment. So this can include the length and breadth of sectors in terms of, for example, e-commerce versus retail, or even IT companies for that matter, are sectors that are fundamentally need at this point of time because everybody wants to go digital now. So that's one part of the thing. I think sectors like airlines are affected on the negative side, airlines, hotels, etc. We don't know how long this will sort of last. How does behavior change? That is going to take some time, but at least in the near term, that's a couple of sectors that could be in a bit of a problem. I think some other sectors like pharma and healthcare should do well in general, and that's also because I think the next time god forbid another pandemic impacts us the next time, the one thing we would want is, let's have a vaccine quickly. Let somebody invest to create that vaccine, right? So I think in general, globally, the policy making with respect to healthcare segment is going to be much more benign, and that is going to be useful in this post corona world. So I think two of them upwards, one of them downwards. Probably these are the segments. That doesn't, however, again tell us anything about valuation. So this is not a recommendation to go and buy. I'm just saying which sectors are going to be there in the next few years and benefit from that. It's quite possible that it's already there in the price, right? Okay. Which sectors will have a bright future in 2040? Too far out. I wish I knew. But again, I think of sectors that are going to stay secularly, and retail is going to stay. Whether you look at e-commerce or brick and mortar, that's a different issue. That's the way the business is done. But as a sector, I'm going to keep purchasing all these products. So anything B2C is most likely going to stay. In B2B, you have to probably see what kind of businesses are coming. So maybe, thermal power will get replaced by renewable energy. Maybe renewable energy will have more bright future in the times to come. Electric vehicles may have brighter future than the internal combustion engine vehicles in the times to come. But there are certain segments where we are likely to see no real dent in the sectors that have, I mean, paints industry, for example. There's no real reason why it should not do well in the next 20 years as well, what it has done in the last 20 years, right? And I'm saying more from an India's perspective, right? Okay, how to choose a sector for the short term trading? This is a little bit tricky and difficult, and be careful when you're doing it. I'll put a disclaimer that things can go wrong in the short term aspect around sectors. Sometimes sectors don't necessarily move very quickly when you think about it, but sometimes you could identify themes and play around. For example, when the pandemic is getting over, you will have a theme of sectors that are going to open up, right? And if you go and look at performance of some of these sectors in the last few weeks, you'll see that sectors that would benefit on an opening up of the economy have done well. So from a shorter term perspective, sometimes tactically you can identify, okay, if conditions like this match, then certain sectors will probably have a better scenario in the next few months, right? And that sometimes works, but it's a little bit risky. So be careful with that from a shorter term perspective. Good return sector, again, I can't really comment very clearly on returns. I wish I knew which sectors had will give good returns. I think some sectors have the ingredients to give good returns. You have to be careful with when you are purchasing them. So valuation is a completely different aspect of things, but certain sectors will keep doing well in India over the next few years, the likes of what we spoke about. Healthcare, IT, even infra for that matter, I think should do well over the period. uh, uh, Capital goods should do well. Cement should do well. Purely from an infra cycle perspective, if India has an infra cycle, then anything that is related to that will probably do well over the next 10 years. The problem is, in the very short run, you don't know which companies and which sectors and which stocks have already priced this kind of a growth in. So sometimes, results could be great, but the stock could fall after that. So you have to be a bit careful with, what is the sector already pricing in. But some of these sectors would probably be your primary sectors in due course of time, in terms of what could do well as we go along, right? So I think that's broadly it in terms of the questions I had at this point of time. which I have kind of taken. Uh, that's broadly it from me, Tanvi. I think we've run out of time then.
That was very enriching information, Piyush, and I'm sure everyone has enjoyed listening to the session. Thank you so much, Piyush, for taking out your time and being with us. I would also like to thank all the attendees for their participation, and I request you all to share your feedback on the session by clicking the feedback button below, and do let us know the topic you would want us to cover the next. Have a very great evening and stay safe. Thank you
Sure.
so much.
Thanks, Tanvi. Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot, and do stay safe. Thank you. Bye bye.